Hello, Flat Earth researchers, debaters and debunkers. If you've recently heard about the Flat Earth, you may have reacted in one of two ways. You might well have just fobbed it off as something crazy because science has proven that we live on a globe for something like 2,000 years. Or you may have started to investigate what actual proofs there are that we live on a spinning ball orbiting a giant sun. So what we'll do here is just have a look at top 10 globe science facts that have actually never really been proven scientifically. They're not science facts. What you'll find is we have a few experiments, lots of observations that have been interpreted into the notion that we are going around a sun, the heliocentric model, as it's often called. So if you start looking into this, the first thing you'll probably find is pages and pages of the alleged first proof that we live on a globe, and that is the Eratosthenes experiment, which apparently determined the circumference of the Earth because of shadows measured on sticks and down a well. And then from that, the size of the sun and the distance to the sun from the Earth has been calculated. But actually it's never ever been measured. No one's ever been to the sun, and really we don't know what the sun is. And this idea that Eratosthenes worked out the circumference of the Earth from measuring shadows is really just an interpretation, because you can get exactly the same results across a flat surface with a local sun. So there's nothing that's ever been really done to prove the idea that the sun is 93 million miles away and that it is many, many more times larger than the Earth. So it isn't a scientific fact that Eratosthenes ever discovered the shape of the Earth, the size of the Earth, or the sun, or the distance to the sun. Sometimes people will talk about the Venus transit, the planet Venus going across the sun, as being a way to then measure or calculate relative distances. But again, if we have nothing to base those measurements off, then all we have are calculations based on assumptions, and again interpretations of observations that can be interpreted either way, especially when you talk about the circumference. All that is being measured in any way is how far away the equator is, where people see the sun directly overhead, compared to where it appears above the horizon but not overhead as you get further and further north. But a circumference is for a circle, it's not for a globe. So again, that's just a matter of interpretation. So this is one of the first so-called facts or scientific discoveries that you'll come across when you look into how we know we live on a globe, when in fact it hasn't been proven scientifically in any way. We've just been given explanations and interpretations. That's number one. Number two, this is the lunar eclipse is commonly used as some kind of proof that we see the globe Earth's shadow cast on the moon. But this, again, is just an assumption, and it goes against any other observation that we can make of shadows, because the illustrations that we are given are a narrowing shadow of the Earth to the sun. Whereas in reality, shadows, no matter how far away the light goes, a shadow never gets smaller than the object casting the shadow. So in actual fact, when the sun is on the other side of the earth to the moon should be in complete darkness, because the earth's shadow should always be cast on the moon, especially given the fact that for me here in Phuket, Thailand, near the equator, the moon and the sun go directly overhead. So if we were on a globe and the moon is over here and the sun is over here, which we see coming over the equator, then whenever the moon is over here and the sun is over here, the moon should always be in shadow, especially given its proximity to the earth. But no, what we actually see is a full moon. When the moon and the sun are allegedly opposite each other, with the globe Earth in between, we actually see a fully lit moon, which shouldn't happen. So lunar eclipses are in no way any kind of proof that the Earth is a globe. And we've never been shown this happening from space. Considering that space exploration has been going on for decades, no one has ever given us a space eye view of the Earth and the moon and the shadow cast by the Earth. Never been done. Even during solar and lunar eclipses, we are never given any other view apart from what we can see from the Earth. So the lunar eclipse is not necessarily the Earth's shadow. It's never been proven as a scientific fact. Number 3, images of Earth and other celestial bodies, moon, stars, planets. Okay, as I mentioned just now, we've never seen the Earth in space with the moon next to it. And if you look for images of Earth from space, you will find a whole variety of images, none of which ever look the same. And we have never seen a single image of the Earth in space with a background of stars or any other planets around. We've never, ever, ever seen any photographs, any full photographs of the Earth in space in the solar system. Yes, of course, people will argue that everything's so far away that will be impossible to do, but several decades ago we apparently sent probes out into the distant galaxies, and since then we've still not been able to have a real photograph of our home from space. Nothing. Or any of its surroundings. Nothing. And when you compare the images we are given of the so-called photographs from space, from the Apollo missions, the continents and everything are different sizes, we've got different colors, nothing matches up whatsoever in the few alleged photographs that we have of the Earth from space. So there simply are no images of Earth from space, or Earth in its surroundings. Number 4, axial tilt. This assumption that the Earth is tilted, and as it goes round the sun we get the seasons because of this axial tilt. This is something that can never, ever, ever be verified whatsoever. Nothing at all. It's never been seen, it's never been measured, nothing. All we have are illustrations and assumptions. We could also add to that that you know the speeds that the Earth is said to be spinning or orbiting the sun have never ever been measured. You can look back at some of the experiments done, Michelson-Morley and various other experiments, to try and measure the speed that we are allegedly travelling through space or around the sun or spinning. None of this has ever been confirmed in the field of science. There is no measurable proof of axial tilt or the speeds of spin or anything related to the idea that we are on a spinning globe orbiting the sun in a heliocentric model. Nothing. Number 5, the ISS being built in space, the largest international project that should have been broadcast to the world as it was being built. Nothing. No photographs, no video. All of a sudden the ISS was up there in space. Number 6, an astronaut's entire journey to the ISS. Now, given the danger of traveling to space and into low Earth orbit and docking with a space station that's apparently traveling around the Earth at 17,000 miles an hour, this is something that should be filmed from the ground to the destination, even if it were for safety's sake. If anything went wrong, people would be able to see what went wrong, or we could keep an eye on the astronauts. But the entire journey, which would and should be a thrilling, adventurous thing, has never ever been filmed. All we see is a rocket taking off. We might see some pictures of astronauts allegedly inside that rocket, and then the next clip we see is astronauts floating through an airlock. We've never seen an entire journey. And with all the money being thrown at these space exploration organizations, you'd have thought they might want to give us something back in that respect. But no, all we get is Hollywood trickery and cut scenes just to give us a story. Number 7, horizontal curvature. Of course, we're all told that the higher or lower you are above the Earth's surface makes a difference to how far we can see to the horizon. So given the idea that at, let's say, we're standing 2 meters or even 1 meter, our eye level is 1 meter above the surface of the Earth, then the distance to the horizon is very short, a couple of miles. But never have we ever seen any equivalent curvature from side to side, horizontally. And really what we're seeing is the result of perspective. The fact that a flat surface appears to rise to eye level, and we get a horizon where the surface and the sky appear to meet. The distance to the horizon is only something that you can calculate if you have a sphere or a circle that is seen side on, and geometry and trigonometry is used to draw tangent lines and create angles and assume that we have to look down to see beyond or to the curve the higher up we get. So really it's just an optical phenomenon. There is no measurable proof, and there is no observation that can ever be made of horizontal curvature. Yes, there are lots of explanations and excuses as to why we can't see that. Apparently you have to get really, really high to see curvature. But then, of course, we're told we can see boats disappearing down a curve when we're standing on the shore. So this is just a contradiction. It's not a scientific fact. There is no curvature ever to be seen. Number 8. The difference in flight times going with or against the Earth's alleged spin, or as a result of Coriolis force. It doesn't matter where you travel on the Earth, which way you fly, there is never any real difference in the flight times, which there should be if the Earth is spinning. Now, people will tell us that, well, the atmosphere is attached to the Earth and it spins with the Earth, so everything's relative. But that's ridiculous, because we have wind and we have everything, we have movement, and in real life, in real physics, the moment you leave a moving surface, okay, you might carry on traveling in the same direction as you were going, but you soon lose momentum, and especially if you are using an aircraft with powered flight, we should be able to go against the spin. And of course, the Foucault's pendulum is used as some kind of proof that the Earth rotates beneath this pendulum suspended in the air. So you see what appears to be a pendulum that goes around, and we're told that's because the Earth is rotating. So the Foucault's pendulum is given as a so-called proof that the Earth rotates beneath us, yet when we take off in an aircraft and separate ourselves from the surface of the Earth, nothing changes. Nothing is ever done to compensate for spin or Coriolis. If the Earth was spinning beneath us when we took off, we would, if we wanted to get to a particular destination, we would head in a direction that would allow us to meet the destination as the destination came round on the moving Earth. This doesn't happen. Whenever we fly directly to the destination. There is no movement of the Earth. Number 9, boats going down a curve. This, of course, is one of the main points or so-called facts or observations that we are told we can make that proves we live on a globe. But in actual fact, all that ever happens to a boat is you might see the bottom of the boat disappear simply because as the boat gets smaller, or appears smaller as it gets further away, then everything in front of the boat, between the observer and the boat, is obviously larger. So a small wave can block off a much larger boat in the distance, and eventually what happens is, if you actually observe boats going off into the distance, they just fade into the distance. They just go beyond the limits to which we can see. And of course, we are told to assume that we can see for millions of miles and light years because we see stars that are millions of miles and light years away. Again, this is just an assumption. And of course, when we're looking up, we're looking through less and less dense air as we look up. But when we look across the surface of the Earth, we're looking through air that is increasingly dense. It's full of water vapor and it acts like a lens. And this is also why we see the sunset. It doesn't go down below a curve, neither do boats. And anyone who spends some time making these observations will see for themselves that boats simply do not go down any kind of curvature. They just go off into the distance. They reach the horizon and then they carry on going off into the distance and eventually just fade into obscurity. In fact, we know that we see colour because we see reflected light. So we look at a yellow flower and we know that that's because all the other colours are being absorbed into the flower and a certain part of the light spectrum is being reflected and we see the colour yellow. So what happens to boats when they go off into the distance? Even if we could zoom in to see them with really good optical equipment, there's a limit to how far out something can go before the light and the colour from that object will be reflected and reach our eyes. There is simply a limit to the distance that we can see across the surface of the Earth. All right? And number 10, gravity. The whole idea that mass attracts mass has never ever been proven. Never. We have one so-called proof, and that's the Eratosthenes experiment. But we could simply do something like take a weight on some scales, and if mass attracts mass, we could then go under a mountain or something like that, and we would then see a difference in the weight if mass attracts mass. The Eratosthenes experiment is no way any kind of proof of this idea that mass attracts mass, and it goes against all science, ignores everything else that can be scientifically measured. And of course, we have to have this assumption that mass attracts mass in order to have so-called gravity and have us do the physically impossible, stick to the outside of a sphere. And this is why gravity is so important to the globe Earth, because the reality is, and physics tells us, that this is impossible. So we have to have this idea of an external force. But what people often forget is that gravity is supposed to be created by the mass of a spherical Earth, yet there is no way to determine the true mass of the Earth. It's all based on calculations and assumptions. So, I hope that helps if you're new to this and gives you food for thought. And please do go ahead and do your own research. Look into real science, real physics, and use your own logic to see what can really be proven, or what has or has not been proven as a scientific fact. Of course, predictions can be made about when the sun will rise and set and when we will see certain things in the sky, but you will find that the entire globe model is based on making observations of objects in the sky, of which we know nothing about. We don't know their distances, we don't know their sizes, we don't know what they're made of, we don't even know how they were created. We don't know any of how, when, or why this Earth began. But what you'll find if you approach this with an open mind is that there are many alternative interpretations of these things we have just looked at, these top 10 alleged facts that we live on the Earth. People will cite satellites as some kind of proof, but satellites are just balloons. Sunrise and sunset can be attributed to a moving sun, not a moving Earth. But again, there is nothing that anyone can ever really prove, because we simply can't get far away enough from this Earth to see it from an outside view. All we have are calculations and mathematical models based on looking up at the sky. Thank you very much.